Hey everybody, JJ Cooper here. Another Baseball America hot sheet. Got Geoff Pontes here. You recognize him. He's been on the show a lot. But it's the start of the season, so we've got a call up as well. Jesús Cano making his hot sheet debut, one of our new additions to the Baseball America staff. We are going to talk all about, we're glad to have Jesús with us. We're going to talk all about our first hot sheet of the regular season here. We're going to look at some of the top performing prospects in all the minors, but we also want to hear your questions, your comments. We'll address them here on the show. Leave those in the YouTube chat. Thank you for everyone for joining us. We're going to dive in. We do want to remember, if you're on YouTube, we also have all of our prospect profiles. So if you want to see our reports on the number one prospect for all 30 organizations, we got that on the YouTube channel right now. But let's hit the first move. First hot sheet of the season, the baseballamerica.com prospect hot sheet, the one we've been doing for 20 plus years now. And Nick Kurtz, the A's first baseman, takes the top spot this week. Kurtz leads the minors with 4 home runs. He has jumped straight to AAA, which is I would normally say an incredibly aggressive assignment for a guy who was drafted last year. But, this is 2025. We've got Cam Smith in the big leagues. We've got, we've got Ryan Johnson in the big leagues. He never even played in the minors. So I would just say at least a slightly aggressive assignment. But Geoff, when we talk about Nick Kurtz, when we talk about kind of why he's number one, I think the bigger question is, okay, this timetable, it feels like it's going to be really fast, especially the combination of Nick Kurtz plus Las Vegas. This could be a pretty wild and a pretty quick ride, I would imagine, through the minors.
Yeah, and I think the date we're kind of waiting on is later this week. I believe is when the actual PPI date comes up. So there's some kind of chatter that potentially maybe that means Kurtz could be up this week. I don't know if that's going to be the case necessarily. I think just strictly from a skills perspective, anyone who followed this guy as an amateur at Wake Forest, we knew how polished the plate skills were. We knew there was outlier power. He's a pretty good athlete for a first base only type of player as well. And, left-handed power with, advanced skills like this just, frankly, don't grow on trees. And, I know our colleague Jesús was blessed with able to see him this spring, which I unfortunately haven't seen since he was at Wake.
No, I just wanted to say, Jesús, I think you saw, every time you saw Nick Kurtz, I feel like you were seeing either a double or a home run. But as you watched him this spring in spring training, the thing that just stood out is I had trouble when I was out there, and I got to see a couple of doubles, but I had trouble finding anyone who didn't think that this guy was going to hit. Like, what were you hearing kind of in spring training?
Well, first of all, I got a really good impression of him because I saw him walk into the A's clubhouse for the first time. And I mean, this kid is massive. He's huge. He's really big frame. And you could just tell how young and raw he is. I mean, he just has so much potential. And like you mentioned, it felt like every time I was watching him, whether it was on the backfields, whether it was a major league game, he was producing extra base hits. I mean, we got a video of him on Baseball America of him just crushing a home run on the backfields over at the Cubs complex, where he hit you could audibly hear the ball land on the back of the structure of the batting cages, and it just garnered this huge reaction. And I think the big thing about him too is he has his power, right? That's his calling card, but he also knows how to hit the ball and use the entire field. When you watch him play, he gets opposite field base hits. He's able to produce those into extra base hits. And I mean, he just has a really good loose swing. And I think that really allows him to hit, pitches that are located throughout the different zone and stuff like that. So, I mean, him firsthand, it's always a treat getting to watch him. And I think for people getting to watch him specifically at Las Vegas ballpark, where the ball just flies, it's a launching pad. I mean, it just really kind of shows the power that he has right now.
So, Geoff, when we talk about timetable, I don't know if he's going to be up before the PPI, deadline, because that's coming really quick. But how much is Jacob Wilson's season last year kind of instructive for this? Because obviously last year the A's drafted Jacob Wilson in the first round, and then he hit 400 basically in the minors, and then boom, he's up in the big leagues. Is that kind of a more realistic approach where it's okay, maybe he's not up there in the first week of April, first and a half week of April, but May, June, is that not are we being over aggressive here? Obviously he's had 4 home runs this week, but are we being overboard here on how quickly he could move, or does that seem like a realistic path?
I mean, I think just in the context of the space we're in right now, the time frame that we're in right now, it's not unrealistic to think that he could move up to the big leagues like within a week or two. He was moved pretty quickly. The fact that he got AFL service time right out of the draft. Now, I know he got hurt and had to make up some time. I never thought the issue with Kurtz in terms of ascending quickly to the major leagues would be a matter of his ability. I think anyone that saw him knew that this was a pretty special bat. We're seeing this was a pretty special class of hitters so far in our early looks. And, this was a guy that was considered a potential 1-1 pick, or at least an option at 1-1. That doesn't happen for college first baseman all that frequently. I know we had one a few years ago in Spencer Torkelson. I think this is a better player than that. So I don't think it's absurd to think that he could be up, within the next couple of weeks. Maybe it's more likely that he does follow a path where he has a couple of months in Las Vegas. He stays healthy, which I think has been the big question mark. He's been injured every summer throughout college. He was injured a little bit last year as well. So if he stays healthy, then yeah, I think June to me is almost like the latest date that I would expect him up. I think he's going to be up in the first half. I would be willing to bet quite a bit on it.
We have a fan question along these lines as well. So, Jesús, Jason Littleworth asks, forgot to add, how do the A's fit Kurtz and Soderstrom both into the lineup? Might we see Brent Rooker getting some playing time in left field?
That's a really good question. I think heading into this season, I was kind of on the same trajectory as what Geoff mentioned, is I think he could have get called up pretty quick. But one thing, too, that's kind of been a surprising, storyline within the A's right now is Tyler Soderstrom is arguably the team's best hitter right now. He's flexing the power. He was their first-round draft pick a couple years ago, and he's finally living up to that potential. And I think him coming into the season, he knew, especially with Kurtz, being drafted and kind of being probably the most major league ready guy in that draft, kind of knew that his back was against the wall, and he's playing with it right now. But I think, with the way Kurtz has been playing right now too, it's hard not to look at him and be like, wow, he would be a really good addition to this major league club team right now, who obviously heading into the season has a lot to prove with the storylines, them being in a new city and the amount of money that they've been able to spend. So they want to have a good season. You want to have a good season every year, but particularly this year, there's a lot going on, right? I think with Soderstrom, he played catcher. He's been playing primarily first base right now, but I also know that he's gone a little bit of time in the outfield too. And I think if they want to be able to bring up Kurtz, I think that could be an option too, especially with how hot his bat's been. But Brent Rooker, especially now that he's fully healthy this year, has gotten a lot of playing time in the outfield too. So it's going to be an interesting pace to kind of see how the A's are going to be able to do it. I think if there were no feasible options and this was A's teams from the past, I think Kurtz would be in the majors right now. But I think it's really early in the season. And the same thing too with the injury concerns. He's been injured past couple of summers. I think they want to take their time with them and really showcase that he's been able to kind of be healthy and do what he's able to do at the AAA level. But I think if he just keeps on swinging the bat the way he does, I think it's going to be hard not to call him up. And, they'll find a way to put him in the lineup. That's the one thing for sure. They'll find a way to put him in there.
I know he hasn't played it yet, but I will also say, and I think Geoff kind of feels this way too, Nick Kurtz is athletic enough. I would probably almost say that he might be a better left fielder than Rooker at this point. Nothing against Brent Rooker, but Brent Rooker's had a whole lot of time to try to play left field and often has struggled with that. But, it's going to be fun to see, and we'll be back right after a quick word from our friends at Foul Territory.
AJ, it is time for people to get some new clubs, and to do that, they need to go to their local PXG for a fitting, right?
No doubt. I was there today. I've been there before. Last time I was there, they gave me this killer gap wedge. Look at that sweet spot, Scott. It is worn out. That is right in the sweet spot right there. So I went and got new clubs today, new irons. But more importantly, I got this bad boy. I got me a new putter. This is my old putter. It's on order. Yes, that's my putter cover. PXG Mustang putter. Now I'm going to the Allen putter. They talked me into it because I was draining some putts today. Bob, the guy who helped me out, he helped me with my irons. He got them teed up perfectly. But then we went to the putting green. I was draining them putts because that's the most important part of golf.
PXG fittings are fun. Schedule your fitting today. As you can hear from AJ, for a limited time, you could save up to 20% on your entire order. Head over to pxg.com/foul. That's pxg.com/foul to save up to 20% on your entire order. pxg.com/FOUL. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
PXG might even be able to help me actually be a halfway decent golfer. But so we're back. And the other thing that you should check out at baseballamerica.com, a lot of stuff to check out there. But we have a top 100 prospects update. We kind of gathered all our information from spring training. Jesús, Geoff, myself, Josh Norris, we're all kind of bouncing around at the backfields. Josh has 100 different prospects that he got scouting feedback on from spring training. We used all that to kind of make some adjustments to our top 100. And I would note with this that there have been a couple of kind of, we try to be really cautious with this, really conservative. We'll make a bigger adjustments, once we have a little bit of the minor league season kind of under our belts. But Geoff, one of the things that does jump out, we did have a couple of players who really did kind of jump up. And I would say that George Lombard Jr. is the Yankees shortstop is probably the most notable one. What was it? Why did we kind of send Lombard on a little bit of another rocket ship up for a guy who really hasn't had a whole lot of minor league production so far?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the funny part of it. But we're not alone in this. I think just throughout the industry, no matter who you were talking to during spring training, I, of course, was stationed on the west coast of Florida. Lombard, for kind of the second consecutive spring training, was being talked about heavily by scouts. I think year over year, the feedback was a lot louder. And there was good reason behind it. You could physically see that he had matured. He had added on actual weight. The swing seemed a little bit more cleaned up. It was more powerful. You can see here, this is from the spring breakout game where he caught a couple of barrels. And honestly, if the wind hadn't been blowing in that day in Sarasota pretty heavily, there's a chance that some of those balls hit the wall, maybe go out. Played a lot in Major League spring training for the Yankees, considering how young he is, only a couple years out of being drafted out of high school, to get, was it 23, 24, 25 plate appearances, somewhere along those lines, was playing in the field, had some production there as well. It's a 5-tool prospect and, an exciting shortstop prospect. It'll be exciting. And, it's going to be great to see sort of what he does in high A this year. But just in terms of what the feedback was and just the actual eye test, the physicality, the swing, all that sort of stuff, just rave reviews across the board on Lombard.
One of the other adjustments that we saw is we added yet another Mariners prospect to the top 100. Ryan Sloan has moved in. The guy that we kind of spent a lot of time in the offseason saying, hey, this guy could pop, and seems like he is starting to pop. But Jesús, you got to see those Mariners on the backfields a lot. I got to see them with you in some cases.
Yeah.
It just feels like that everywhere you turn on those backfields now, pretty much everywhere in the minor leagues now that the season started, the Mariners seem to have a couple of really interesting hitting prospects. What jumps out, like 8 top 100 prospects, what jumps out about this Mariners system right now?
I think specifically for the Mariners, I think they have a good history of developing players, whether it's on the international side or the domestic side. As you guys can see, like that name that we have right here on the board right now, like it's a different flavor. You got some high school guys, you got some college guys, but you also have a lot of international flavor mixed in there too. I think for me, like a player that really called out to me and stood out to me was Lázaro Montes. I know the defense, that comes into play, but every time I've gone to watch him play, whether it was in Modesto last year or whether it was here on the backfield where I got to meet you, JJ, it seems like he's always making improvement, and his power is really there. Like I know they compare him to Yordan Alvarez. You can definitely see that in there. And it's all across the board, whether it's with Celeste and whether it's with Michael Arroyo. They have hitters that are good contact first hitters that know how to use the ball over the field. And I think, too, it's also encouraging to see Ryan Sloan. There's been huge raves about him on the backfields. And I got to see him a bit out there with Josh Norris, too, about the way that he's been able to use his pitches and really located the zone. And I think that, there's plenty to be excited about when it comes to Sloan. He's so young. Starting the year down there and all that stuff, like he's going to be on really good track because the Mariners have a good track record of producing guys like that.
So, Geoff, another guy who really kind of rose up our board, already was on the top 100, but so why did the Pirates, now center fielder, used to be shortstop / RHP, but now center fielder, Konnor Griffin, what is the feedback we're getting that led to him kind of getting another bump?
Yeah, I think it was primarily driven by the tools, number one. Number two, and this is another thing that I think you can see, there's plenty of videos of it up on Twitter. Some people have even done breakdowns. I think Chris Clegg had a good breakdown side by side. There's been a significant improvement in terms of what his swing looked like as an amateur to what it's like now. There's still swing and miss in the profile. He had some strikeouts over the course of the weekend. also hit a ball 111 miles an hour. There's just not a lot of guys that sort of blend this amount of tools and skills. He's a 70 runner, covers, huge swaths of ground in center field. He's got a big arm, obviously was a pitcher and, was a pretty good prospect just as a pitcher alone, was a shortstop, does all those sort of peripheral things really, really well. Physically, he's impressive as well. He's a big, strong guy. There's probably more projection, coming as well, more strength. And I just think that the combination of athleticism, physicality, and tools just really stands out. And, he was a guy that, once again, really did impress scouts and was really impressive in the backfields. And I think as things start to get going here in the low A season, and is going to put up some pretty gaudy stat lines in games.
You can stream live MLB games through the FanDuel Sports Network. And if you use promo code BASEBALL30, you can start it off with a 30-day extended free trial at FanDuelSportsNetwork.com/packages. You can see teams including the Tigers, the Braves, the Royals, the Angels, the Marlins, the Brewers, the Cardinals, the Rays, and the Reds. Offer expires 5/2/25, $19.99 a month after the free trial. Cancel during your free trial to avoid any charges. Eligibility restrictions apply. Visit FanDuelSportsNetwork.com for details. So we also have had a trade today that's worth kind of chewing apart, taking apart, analyzing. We see the Brewers pick up right-hander Quinn Priester from the Red Sox. Quinn Priester has been a well-traveled man lately, was traded from the Pirates to the Red Sox, now from the Red Sox to the Brewers. In return, the Brewers get Joffrey Rodriguez and competitive balance pick A, which is basically a just after the first round pick. So, Geoff, when you look at this, I'll start with, Quinn Priester was a first round pick. This is a guy who's been a prominent prospect for quite a while. Let's start with the Brewers side of what they could be getting in Priester. What do you, beyond the fact that they need starting pitching right now, we know that, but is there something here that could really be appealing to them in adding Priester?
Yeah, I think it's just, his innate ability to spin the baseball. This dates back to when he was an Illinois prep prospect. Just a guy that puts up big spin rates. He's got great feel for spin. He's got two good breaking ball shapes. They don't sort of jump off the page when you look at the Stuff Plus numbers that are on FanGraphs, via, Saris, etc. But when you look at the numbers, like their high spin rate slider, kind of a gyro slider, it's like 87, 88 miles an hour, high spin rates, pretty good. I think there's something to work with there. There's velocity, there's raw spin, which you can't really teach those things necessarily. You can a little bit, obviously, you can coach it out. But particularly when it comes to spin with velocity, it's just a combination. You don't see that frequently. He's got a hard curveball, like 82 to 83, 84. Another high spin one with some movement. He's found this sinker over the last couple of years, which is a much better fit than sort of the four-seam cutter that he was throwing before. He's not a guy with high efficiency. The shapes of the fastballs, etc., haven't been great. But I do think when you sort of look at it, and take a step back, there are some elements here that their pitching lab, which has been very successful with a lot of different pitchers, has done really well with.
So I also kind of want to ask with that though, so what is it that Priester hasn't been able to unlock so far? We're talking about someone who's had basically an over 6 ERA in the majors with the Pirates and basically one start with the Red Sox. He was at Worcester for basically one start before this, but what is it, that he needs to do you feel like, for this not to be, we're going to get to the Red Sox side, but for this to be a good trade for the Brewers, what is it that he's still, when you say he's got that spin rate, he's got that fastball, but there is kind of that other part that needs to kind of take another step forward, doesn't there?
Yeah, no, I think it's the command and execution of the pitch mix. I think that's been the biggest thing is he's missed bats in the upper minors. And then if you go and you can just take a quick scan of his FanGraphs page, as soon as he gets up to the major leagues, those swing and strike rates plummet by like 40, 50%. He's just not able to miss bats. Guys are queuing up on the sinker. I don't know if he's tipping stuff. I don't know if there's some release elements. Just kind of hasn't found another gear or taken another step forward. And I think when you look at it from the Red Sox perspective, they really had anticipated that this guy was going to compete for a rotation spot, maybe take that number 4 spot in the rotation. And ultimately it was Richard Fitz who sort of passed him. So, I think from the Red Sox perspective, they felt that he didn't take that step forward. Maybe the Brewers feel that there's something else they can unlock, but it certainly comes down to execution and really command. But I think there might be some deception elements too, because it's easy to see the ball out of his hand. And that's just from my own anecdotal experience of having watched him live a few times.
So the Red Sox get Joffrey Rodriguez in return, who's kind of an interesting but very young, kind of still very far away, I would say, Brewers outfielder prospect. Was number 14, I believe, on our top 30 for the Brewers. That's something. That's not nothing. But then I think the key part also is that they also get the 33rd pick in the draft. And I'll just kind of phrase it this way, Geoff. The Red Sox traded Nick York to get Quinn Priester, and then this is what they got in return. As I look at it, I would probably, especially when you throw in the pick, I kind of feel like that the Red Sox basically almost got a finder's fee for kind of being the team that kind of had Priester briefly and then kind of sent him along. I probably would prefer to have the return they got than Nick York, but I wonder what you thought.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, they had actually lost. Didn't they lose a pick too? Didn't they have a comp pick that they ended up losing because of signing Bregman or Bueller? So I think like in some instances, you just look at it and they added last year it was $2.76 million and some change that slot value was worth. It's going to go up probably again this year. So you just added, close to $3 million to your bonus pool. If you know the draft, and we on this show obviously do, that's one where that gives you a lot of power to maybe move somebody back to pick 14 or 15 where they're picking in the first round, or pull somebody down into, that pick 33 range if they underslot earlier. There's just a lot of things that they can do. I think that's the prime piece to me is the value there. The other thing is they've done pretty good in those comp rounds. I mean, Christian Campbell and Roman Anthony were comp picks, right? So it's an area where they shop pretty well.
So we've got a couple of fan questions we want to get here. So we'll kind of jump in first. Bob Jones asks for our thoughts on Bryce Eldridge. I'll just handle that one real quick, which is our thoughts is that we're looking forward to seeing him in AAA this year. A little bit slowed in spring training by a relatively, hopefully minor injury. But at the same time, I would say that we're still looking at an ETA of hopefully mid to late 2025, big time power. Does need to get better defensively at first base. I think that would be the biggest question. And the other one we had was, I believe, a question about Nestor Herman, which was, how high are you on Nestor Herman? Is he a mid-rotation guy, higher, lower? And same question for JT Ginn. Geoff, you were in Orioles camp for us. Our number 11 prospect on our Orioles top 30. I would say that we've got Herman kind of projected as, if it all breaks right, like a number 4 starter. Does that seem accurate to you?
Yeah, I think the big question mark with Herman is, is the command going to stay where it was last year? Certainly in my very quick look during the spring breakout game, it wasn't. And the other part of it is, if this guy, he's got great ride on the fastball. It's outlier ride. Gets, 20 plus inches of ride, et cetera. There's good metrics. He's got a deep arsenal. I think that, the secondary is getting a little sharper, and then maybe adding a couple ticks of velocity if he's sitting, more like 93, 94 to 96 versus 92 to 94 with that ride, then yeah, I think there's maybe more upside there. Right now, I think he's, a back end starter. I think he'd be pretty comfortable putting like a number 5, sort of role on him long term, maybe a number 4, depending upon the team, the situation, and the stuff ticks up a little bit. There is that other element, though, that he could find another gear. Because, there's some foundational traits that I really like with Herman.
I'll kind of answer again very quickly, which is, I would say you're hoping that he's a back of the rotation. I would say, it's been a little bit more of an up and down. He's had some injuries he's fought through. He is at AAA right now, and I would say that I wouldn't be shocked at all to see him get a call at some point before this year is over. But we'll have to see how he survives Las Vegas, which is a very tough test for a pitcher. But it's time now for the Player to Watch, presented by FanDuel Sports Network. And today we are going to take a look. Chase Burns has made his minor league debut and in very impressive fashion. Like a lot of these starting pitchers early in the season, especially in the little bit colder climes, didn't pitch particularly long in his first outing. But Geoff, you got to kind of watch it, and then you kind of got a little bit of a taste of the data from it. And I think you kind of came away very impressed.
Yeah, I think, we're at a point now with Jackson Jobe in the Tigers rotation, with Roki Sasaki, in the Dodgers rotation. We got to ask the question, comparing him to Bubba Chandler, Andrew Painter, and some of the other top pitchers in the game, is this the best pitching prospect that remains in the minor leagues? I think if you watched him and Hagen Smith, both looked very good this weekend. Burns looked utterly dominant to the point that it was almost goofy of like, why is this guy in high A? Because he's just overpowering these guys. And the stuff is just, unbelievable. This is the first time we've seen it not on college numbers with college baseballs. There's always a little bit of variance in terms of how the numbers look. He's sitting 98 miles an hour. He hit 99.5. I think he might have hit 100 miles an hour at peak. Big spin rates on that pitch. It's a true cut ride four-seamer. 18 inches of induced vertical break is what he averaged. Under an inch of horizontal. So it is a true cut four-seam fastball at 98 miles an hour. I encourage you to go and plot your own data out and look at the best fastballs in terms of miss rate in the major leagues right now. And guys like Glasnow, et cetera, it's mostly these cut ride fastballs that sit 96, 97. He's got a major league 80 pitch, I think, potentially. And then you look at the slider, sat 88 miles an hour. He gets 7 inches of horizontal break at 88 miles an hour. Sometimes it's 90 plus. Mixed in a little bit of the curveball through a couple of changeups as well, which I think are underrated pitches. He just didn't have to throw them very frequently in the ACC or in the SEC when he was with Tennessee. So I think we're looking at Chase Burns right now, and this guy could really just, rock it up. Rankings, even from where he's already ranked, which is pretty high. And I don't know. I mean, at this point, there's nothing here. I think he should probably already be in AAA, frankly. That's the skill level. That's what it looks like.
I think you saw what they did with Rhett Lauder. He went from basically, it was like high A, double A, triple A, big leagues last year. I don't think that's crazy at all to think that Burns may do this year. But okay, Jesús, if Geoff is making the case for, and we're going to put Andrew Painter on the side here because he is getting ready to make his minor league debut this year, but and I know it was in the AFL, but we will put him to the side and say he's not a current minor league pitcher until he makes that debut. You make the case. Why is Bubba Chandler maybe the best pitching prospect still in the minors?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think it also helps that Bubba Chandler's potentially, even though he plays pitcher, he's potentially the best athlete in all of the minors right now. You got to remember he was originally committed to Clemson to play football and baseball. Pirates were able to sway him to sign with them, out of high school. But I think you look at the numbers that he was able to produce last year, strikes out 148 strikeouts, across AA and AAA. And his fastball, while not as fast as Burns's, that tips, close to 100, it sits at 96 to 97. And from what I was looking at from what his first start, it touched 98 over his first start where he pitched 2 2/3 innings. And the heater, was one of the more impressive pitches throughout all of minor leagues from what people were saying, from what scouts were saying, from what we've been able to see. And the other thing, too, is like I got to talk to Bubba Chandler last year for a bit on a story that I was working on with him. And I think one thing that stood out to me about what he was able to say is he treats every outing like a chess game, right? There's a lot of different variables that go into play. It's who you're matching up with. And I think really hearing that, it really shows his maturity. It really shows that the way he's taking this game more seriously. And I think you've been able to see that, he's a proven striker and he's starting to develop his breaking pitches, his secondary pitches a little bit more, he's trying to really learn how to be a pitcher. I feel like when you're a lot of pitchers that like just throw velocity, just are throwing gas and stuff like that, kind of rely on that to be able to get out of situations. But he's been really able to show that he's able to rely on his changeup. He's been getting to incorporate his slider and his curveball a little bit more. So I think the biggest thing is like he's proven to be all developed pitching. And you look at what the Pirates have been able to produce, with Paul Skeens, I think that's a little bit of a, outlier because he just has raw talent and ability, but also developing Jared Jones and then now having Bubba Chandler up this pipeline. Like it's going to be a really exciting young group of trio when they both get called up. So I think, outside, Burns, amazing, great. But But I think outside of him, Bubba Chandler is up there too as one of the better pitchers in the minors, and I think it's going to be really exciting when he's pitching in the majors.
That was our Players to Watch presented by the FanDuel Sports Network. You can now stream live MLB games through FanDuel Sports Network. And if you use the promo code BASEBALL30, that's baseball30, you can start it off with a 30-day extended free trial at FanDuelSportsNetwork.com/packages. Teams include the Braves, the Tigers, the Royals, the Angels, the Marlins, the Brewers, the Cardinals, the Rays, and the Reds. Expires 5/2/25, $19.99 a month after free trial. Cancel during free trial to avoid charges. Eligibility restrictions apply. Visit FanDuelSportsNetwork.com for details. Well, y'all, thank you for coming out for another Hot Sheet Show. I'm sorry, I know there were a couple of questions we didn't get to. Apologies on that. But do check us out on the podcast feed. If you enjoy this, please, leave us a favorable review on whatever your favorite podcast catcher is. And like and subscribe if you're watching this on the YouTube channel. We love that helps us, other people get to see it. And do check out the top prospect profiles, which are over on our YouTube channel as well. If you want to see reports on all number one prospects for all 30 organizations, we have them there. Check out the prospect coverage on the Baseball America YouTube channel, baseballamerica.com, where we have more stuff. If you want to see who are the youngest players in every single league in the minors, we've got that top 20 youngest players also up at baseballamerica.com, and a new number one in our college top 25. Also check out the Foul Territory YouTube channel as well. For Jesús, for Geoff, I'm JJ. So long, everybody.